Hello, everyone. Welcome to the EA Global Summit 2022. So this is Nabil from the EA Global Summit organizing team. First of all, thank you everyone for joining us and showing your interest for the session. The session will be presented by Nizam, the founder and product owner of Prolaborate. The session will be a great takeaway for Prolaborate users, where Nizam will take us through various phases of executing Prolaborate at daily work, right from product overview to granular access control to dashboards and reviews. So before Nizam starts his presentation, let me explain some ground rules. So the participants are muted throughout the session, and if you have any queries or questions during the session, please use the chat. And post the session, you can also use the Teams link. The questions will be read. We will be reading out the questions, and the speaker will be answer the queries during the Q&A at the end of the session. And even if you have anything, you can continuously post it on the chat. To enable the collaboration and communication with Nizam and other EA practitioners directly after the session, we request you to use the dedicated channel for this session in the Microsoft Teams. Nizam and other speakers have kindly accepted to stay in the channel to have one-on-one discussion with and to answer your queries. So I'm just pasting. I'll paste the the link in the chat. And if you have any difficulties in connecting to the channel, please reach us in the registrations at eaglobalsummit.com email. And thank you once again for your interest and support to join the EA Global Summit 2022. Looking forward for the wonderful session, Nizam. Over to you, Nizam. You may present now.
Thank you very much, Nabil. I hope my screen is visible.
Yes, it is.
And I've got the right screen, I believe. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining. It's a great pleasure to see everyone in the EA Global Summit. So this is the first instance of the monthly Prolaborate training that we plan to have for the current and prospective Prolaborate customers. And I am Nizam, and I've been associated with Sparx Systems for quite a while now. And I've been operating with Sparx Systems in different capacities. I've been a consultant, I've been an implementation assistant, and then I've also been working with the team on developing and managing Prolaborate as well. So in this session, what we will try to do is, so the objective of this session is to mainly showcase the detailed features of Prolaborate and make sure people who have already invested in Prolaborate and who are contemplating to expand to Prolaborate gets the real value out of the product. So investing in a software is one thing, but then getting the best out of it is another whole exercise of its own. And we kind of believe it's our responsibility to make sure people are brought on board, are given the right exposure to the kind of value that one can get from the software. And in an attempt to do that, we have planned to do these training programs on a monthly basis. So even if you or your colleagues are interested in attending one of these sessions in the future, we'll be reaching out to you with updated information on month-on-month basis as well. And then as an agenda for today, it's a planned 2.5 hours session, and I've reserved the last 30 minutes. So it's been set up as a 3-hour session, but I'll be doing a 2.5, and the last 30 minutes is reserved for anyone to ask even an implementation question. So if you are a current Prolaborate user, you have hit a snag or a bottleneck or an issue or something like that, I'll be more than happy to give an attempt to fix it or show you what you could do in such a scenario. So please feel free to drop in your query using a chat window. So there is a GoToWebinar chat as well, which you could use. to post your queries, which we'll try to answer at the end of this session itself. For some people who had some difficulties finding where the chat is in GoToWebinar, so there's a chat window out here which you could use to post your queries, and I'll try to answer them towards the end of the session. So we'll be starting with an intro to what the Sparx platform stands for. I mean, today, so it's evolved a lot from what it used to be a couple of years back. It used to be a standalone modeling tool, but it has evolved into something more holistic and addressing multiple use cases. And from there, we'll be focusing on 4 key use cases for which we developed Prolaborate. So I think I'm one of the few people who can talk about the root or the genesis of why this product even came into existence. So I have tried to identify the 4 key use cases which kind of made us come up with an idea like this and implement it. So we'll be focusing on the main pain points that Prolaborate addresses. So these are the use cases for the Enterprise Architect users and the extended non-EA community to whom we are targeting this model towards. So we'll be focusing on the 4 use cases, primarily how to get better focus on the model contents, how to simplify your model contents, and then we'll be focusing on how to curate the complex information in an enterprise architect model so that it is intuitive and easily understood by the people who are not EA modelers. The whole idea of Prolaborate is to take all the work that we as architects and enterprise architect users put in to create a lot of models, like connectors and tagged values and loads and loads of artifacts and diagrams. But the key value out of these models and this effort will be manifested only when it's been consumed by the right audience, and that's what Prolaborate intends to do. So the curation is one important phase where you could do Prolaborate presents a variety of options for us to take the EA model information and present it. So I'll be going through that in a fair bit of detail, and each of these sessions I'll be showing you the actual product and try to show you how to use it as well. So it's not just going to be a like a presentation or a walkthrough, like a PPT walkthrough. And in the last session and the last hour, we'll try to go through the engagement aspect, which is a key focus of Prolaborate as well. The name kind of came it was the idea was professional collaboration. So that's what Prolaborate stands for. So collaboration or engagement is one of the very important aspects that we try to focus on. The whole platform is kind of designed in such a way that it encourages people to participate, share their feedback, and make it something that is inclusive, not just an architect's work, but an inclusive work from the rest of the world as well. And in the last 15 minutes, I'll try to just go through some of the features that I feel that could be a real value add in 4.2. So we'll also talk about the way we work, the way we include new features as we go through this session. So it's always customer facing, rather than we trying to come up with something fancy and try to say the customers may need it. It's the other way around. So we came up with an idea, it worked well, and then we are now trying to understand what the actual use cases are, where has it really been applied, and try to improve accordingly. So that's there are a couple of things in 4.2, which is the latest release, that could be of interest as well. And the last 30 minutes will be the questions. Okay, so with that said, we're going to start with what is the Sparx Architecture Platform. So we refer to the Sparx products rather than calling them as individual products. We are referring to it as an architecture platform, rightly so, because it's all kind of stitched to one another. So they are targeted for specific use cases. So an architecture platform is going to be highly useful to create some diagrams and artifacts and interconnections for traceability, and you could model all the metadata like tag values and stuff like that, and that's done in the core offering, which is Enterprise Architect. So EA is still the tool that is expected to be used by the modelers to create architecture content, but then that is one part of the bigger use case. because in any real-time application of an architecture tool set, that that is an important part, but that wouldn't suffice all the use cases. We need to then integrate with maybe the rest of the enterprise application landscape, like ServiceNows and Jira's and Confluences and Doors and things like that. And that's where the PCS, which is the REST API and an enabler for remote connection, like cloud connections, came into picture. And the third component is Prolaborate, which pretty much takes all the models that are created using EA and presents it in a web platform that in a way that people could consume it, understand it, slice and dice it, and also collaborate on it. So that's Prolaborate, and together these three tools kind of forms the Sparx Architecture Platform as it stands today. So before going to Prolaborate, I would like to share a few pointers on Enterprise Architect and the way we should probably be looking at setting up Enterprise Architect. I'm sure most of the people who are using EA extensively would know this, but it's as a consultant originally, I would like to share my experience because I have seen a number of large teams just buying the tool off the shop and just buying the tool and just downloading, installing, and start using it. That could be a way to start using EA, but if it is done that way, what we will end up is another Visio variant. We are going to just create diagrams, but we are not going to create any models. And a model is what is important to satisfy business use cases. So why are you implementing an architecture tool? If you're just going to create a diagram, I think there are many options for it. You are looking at Enterprise Architect because it's standard compliant. It could have a governance around it, and it could help you solve some real business problems. So let's flip the table. You please start with your business problems that you would like to address, and then go and implement the tool in such a way that it helps you achieve those use cases. So this is the best practices that I would strongly urge, if anyone hasn't done this, to consider doing these in setting up an EA practice, because all I could say about Prolaborate, like curations and insights and reports and things like that are all really good. But if you don't have a good EA model that is consistent, that is governed, it's not going to be as fruitful as it should be. And as an EA practice, people who are investing your time and money creating EA models, you would also like to have something that's adding a lot more value and insights rather than a diagramming tool. As I said, if it's only diagramming, there are plenty of options, easier options out there to create diagrams. But here we are looking at a modeling tool. So there are some upfront efforts that needs to be in place to get a model that is conformant and governed. And what I mean by that is, if you understand what you want to achieve, so it could be application portfolio rationalization, it could be capability analysis, it could be solution architecture, it could be data architecture. I'm not saying there's only one thing that you could do. It could be a number of things that you would like to do. There could be a number of teams in your organization want to do different things, but understand what they want to do. Come up with a meta model that caters to those use cases, because EA supports a whole raft of frameworks: UML, SysML, Archimate, BPMN, TOGAF, DODAF, MODAF, you name it, it's going to be supported there. But how relevant is all these frameworks to your team? In most cases, a number of people wouldn't even know such frameworks exist. So if you slap one of those frameworks to your teams and say, go do it, it's not going to have a great adoption. For example, if I take an Archimate business process or a business service and try to connect it to an application component, there are 5 different ways Archimate could allow you to connect them. But if you expect every single modeler who's going to use this tool to understand what those 5 relationships mean and try to choose one of those, that's not something that's workable, and it's not scalable as well. So what EA does is it will let you define a meta model that could exactly zero in on the type of connector that you would like to see, the type of attributes or the tag values that you would like to see. And if you could come up with a meta model definition like that, the EA configuration can be tailored to that, so that you only expose the parts of the model that you want your users or your architects to use, and the rest of them will be hidden. So it reduces noise, it kind of reduces complexity, and it makes it a lot more usable, and the model will be consistent. Why am I emphasizing this? Without a consistent model, without a governed model, it's not really going to be as fruitful to invest your time on presenting it and reporting on it, or providing insights based on it. And a meta model definition, this is just a quick sample. Like, if I say these are the things I would like to see in my business application information technology, BA/IT layers, I can eliminate all the 100 other things that you could do in business layer, but I'm just focusing on certain things because I would like to answer certain queries. So, I'm not saying this is one size fits all. It's just a sample meta model to show you what I'm referring to. And if you could do that, your configuration, like the initial setup, of course, it's going to take a little bit of upfront effort, but if it could be done one-off, that will be a much simpler, focused user interface for the users. I'm talking about EA users. Like, the first thing in the adoption is getting your EA users on board. So, getting a focused interface, simplifying their learning curve so that they don't have to go through, weeks of training to get to do their first diagram. It's going to be much more focused and easier for them to use. You could onboard a wider team so that your modeling tool becomes the crux of your teams, rather than each one of them still sticking to Excels and Visios and other tools, and you trying to do everything again in Enterprise Architect. So these are just some basic steps. I'm sure most of you in this forum would know these already, but it's just I just want to emphasize this because these steps are important to have a strong EA model before moving on to anything like Prolaborate. Okay, Prolaborate in its simplest form could be used as a diagram sharing utility, in which case you just create a diagram and use Prolaborate to share or review and collaborate. That's a perfect use case as well as a quick start. But if you are talking about something that's longer term, like that's going to add value, some of the upfront efforts that I spoke about will be essential. So with that said, we are going to move to Prolaborate. And Prolaborate's use cases, as I said, like we came up with the whole idea of Prolaborate because I've been working as a consultant. We've been doing consulting and implementing for our users for years and years. And one thing we notice in almost every serious organization is, hey, I've done all the models in the world and they are in Enterprise Architect, and now I'm trying to engage the people who need to review it or use it or provide a sign off, and they ask for a PPT once again. So they would say, you would give me a slide deck with these diagrams, or even worse, some people will say, can you convert it into a Visio image that I could see and understand it better? So that is a big no. It's quite disappointing when you are in such a situation, and we thought there should be a better way to do it, and that's where Prolaborate came into picture. So we wanted something that is targeted for non-EA users. So I emphasize this, it's for non-EA users whose inputs are highly critical for an active evolution of your EA models. So your EA model is done by the architects, but it needs inputs from the non-EA community who reviews it, who approves it, who kind of enhances it, updates it, and maintains it. So it's multiple use cases that kind of made us come up with something like Prolaborate. And what it allows you to do is, it will allow you to simplify what your end user sees. So EA could have quite a large repository with multiple packages, multiple diagrams, nesting, grouping, and all those things. However, Prolaborate will help you selectively share parts of your model and parts of your model that the stakeholders will be interested in, and that part of the model could be further refined and curated to give the best experience for that user. For example, if you are targeting a business process management BPM group, and you want them to only focus on the process layer out of your big fat enterprise architecture model, you could firstly hide everything else that's irrelevant to them. But even in the contents that you're sharing to them, you can then say, I want them to first look at these processes. So this is the dashboard that they kind of land in, and these are the kind of details I want them to look at, and I want them to provide inputs on X, Y, and Z. So you could have a specific customer experience or the user experience factored in using Prolaborate. So that's what Prolaborate's main objective was, to not recreate slide decks and videos out of a already done EA model, rather use the insights and data in your EA model and present it in a way that anyone could understand. And then there are some advanced use cases, like providing like reviews and workflows and advanced dashboards, like charts and graphs out using your live EA model. Again, this is important because it's all live EA model. Let's say you're using an application inventory. An application inventory in an EA model is like a package or a number of nested packages that you're using to capture all your applications, and it will have metadata, integrations, interfaces, connections, so on and so forth. But if you want the entire IT team to look at your application inventory and understand its life cycle or its sunset date or its business unit, that's the kind of insight you want to show to a non-EA user using the live model that you have created. And that's where these dashboards and reports and charts becomes highly relevant and useful. So we'll be looking at these use cases in more detail. And as I said, I've just shortlisted 4 focus areas for enterprise architect users, and we'll be going through this in a little more detail. Just a quick note, I should have mentioned while I was talking about the agenda, we will plan a 10 minutes break by the end of every hour, so that the first 2 hours at least, so that we get time to get a cup or take a walk. So if I am running over time, I request the moderators to just alert me. So I'm sometimes not mindful of the time. So just a note. So coming back, the 4 use cases for enterprise architect users. First is better focus. What do we mean by better focus? So there is, for example, there is always, these are the pain points that we kind of come across. So there's always a lot of content. So diagrams and packages and sub packages, there's going to be plenty of them as your EA model gets bigger and more used by the wider team. So one of the problem is, how do I get my stakeholders to just focus on the right contents rather than showing everything to them and making them find what is important to them. So that is the first problem. And then we have the conventional methods, like publishing it as a Word document or HTML publish and things like that. But those are all kind of static ways of publishing. So I could present it in a Word document or a PDF, but that's going to be again going to a static content. So we are taking a model that is living and breathing and publishing it into a Word document. In itself, it becomes static. So of course, I'm not discounting the fact that Word documents are still important, but there should be a better way to show a live model at the same time in a controlled manner, so that they get better focus. And just to explain what I refer to it, I mean what I mean by that. So there's an enterprise architecture model, and you could see that there's application domains and business domains, which has processes and applications and use cases and whatnot. And now I have 3 different teams, so client management team, product management team, and supply management team. And I want those teams to just look at the contents that are relevant to them. So for example, a client management team, I just want them to look at the client management related aspects and hide the product management or the supply management related aspects from them. Similarly, product management team, I just want them to look at what is relevant to them. So that is kind of what we are talking about when I say selectively share parts of the model. So we are not creating a copy, we are not publishing it anywhere, but at the same time, we are just hiding contents that are irrelevant to the team based on the roles or the groups that we create and Prolaborate will take care of automatically, reducing the complexity and just showing them what is important to them. And the second thing is, even in these packages, what you could do is, in the supply management team, there could be a certain group of people who might have the control to edit some process attributes, update some description of or documentation of the processes, but there could be other people in the group who may or may not be able to edit it, but maybe just collaborate on it. So there are, first thing is eliminating contents, and the next thing is about giving granular access permissions so that people get a controlled access to the environment. And this is accomplished in Prolaborate using two features. One is called sections. So sections is the first step of Prolaborate configuration, and what we do in this is you'll be given the full EA repository as you start, and then you just pick and choose the packages that you want to be part of this Prolaborate project. So the packages that you don't choose will be completely hidden from the project. So it will be removed from the project. There are some fine nuances which I can answer if there are questions around it. Like, for example, what will happen if there's a traceability coming from an object that is in one of these packages? Prolaborate will show there is a connected item, but it wouldn't allow you to click to navigate or do anything of that sort. So first thing is about sections, where you could pick and choose the packages that you want to be shown in the Prolaborate project. And the second step, which is the most focused step, is here you pick and choose the packages or the sub packages for which you want to give access. So the access could be read and collaborate, or read, write, and collaborate. And what I mean by write access is, people generally ask, one of the questions is, can I edit EA diagrams in Prolaborate? The answer is no. EA is meant to do the diagrams, and this is not for diagram editing. However, we could do most of the other aspects in terms of editing, like you can update the nodes, you can update its properties, you can update the tag values, you can create a few elements, you can create connectors, you can remove connectors. So you can make the users use Prolaborate to edit your model information. And this is a very important use case as well, because this one part of the architecture practice is to build the model, and the second, the most important part, is to maintain the model. And when it comes to maintaining the model, the entire responsibility is on the architectural team to maintain it, which is incredibly difficult, because there are so many moving parts in an organization, and you can't expect everything to be cascaded to the architect so that he or she updates it. But what you could do with Prolaborate is, instead of making or letting them update it using an Excel sheet that they have or that they maintain locally, you can give them access to Prolaborate in a controlled manner, and in a granular access control, so that you can tell them which part of the artifact would you be interested to let them edit. So you can very well control to the granularity of details that you can allow them to edit. So I'll come to it in a moment, but this access control permission is an important step, where you could say, I want this team to be able to read, write, and collaborate, or read and collaborate on a package and all its sub packages. And the good thing is, based on this setting, if the BPM team or the application portfolio management APM team is not given access to the information domain, they will not see this package in their list of packages at all. So in their view portal, they'll only get to see the contents that they've been given permission to either read or write. So the things that are not assigned to a user or a user group will not even show up in their portal. So this gives us even more granularity. So I haven't seen very many people using to that detail, but if you have 100 applications and you don't want to show 50 applications in a package, you can even control that. So that's the kind of support Prolaborate offers. But as I said, honestly, I haven't seen anyone using to that level of control. But you can choose which packages to be shown and which packages should be hidden from a user or a user group. So this assignment can be happening on a user or a user group level. Okay, and another option is there are teams whom I work with. They say, okay, see, I am least bothered about all these granular access permissions. I have done my configuration in the sections where I have chosen which packages should be implemented or included. Now just forget about all these granular access permissions. I just want the whole repository to be read-only access or read and collaborate access to everyone who logs in. So there is an option for you to go single access for all the repository contents and just say read and collaborate. And if you say read and collaborate or read, write and collaborate, people who are going to access this portal are anyways going to be controlled by some authentication system. Okay, it could be system users, which not very many users or I mean very many clients use these days. Almost everyone wants an SSO integration, and Prolaborate has the most comprehensive SSO integration support. Like, you could have any of your ADFS or SAML or even the Active Directory kind of an integration, and the user authentication and onboarding happens so seamlessly, and they will all get one single permission. So these are two options. One is going to a granular access control, or just letting them all have the same access. And I'll just so these two steps are important. Like, these are pretty much the first thing that we would expect anyone to do. And the basics, like, to just start with the basics, a Prolaborate project is nothing but a connection to a EA repository. So we use ProCloud Server, the HTTPS connection through ProCloud Server to set up a EA repository in Prolaborate. And once you set up a EA repository in Prolaborate, the first thing, like I said, will be configuring sections. And in these sections, you get to see the full EA project browser over here. And from here, I could just drag and drop the contents that I would like to see in my Prolaborate project. This is as simple as that. Bear in mind, we are not talking about writing complex queries, going to a database level and trying to hide a few things. That's not what we're talking about. Just drag and drop, and that's your first cut. Like, you are eliminating all these packages from even being shown in your Prolaborate project. And once that is done, I'm now going to configure the access permissions, and this is where it gets more interesting, because when we go to access permissions, as I said, there is a single access. So if I say single access, all these packages which have been shortlisted will be visible to everyone with some single access control. However, what we have as an option is pick and choose a package or a sub package or even an element. So I could, as I said, I could apply these permissions at an element level. So if I have the time to do all this configuration, or if there's a necessity to do such a configuration, instead of giving access to this package and say apply recursively, I could just say these 5 things I want to show, and these 5 will be hidden. So that is the kind of control that Prolaborate allows, but as I said, no one really uses. I haven't seen anyone using to that detail. But what you could do is pick a top level package, pick a group, so you will be seeing both groups and users in this. And once you pick a group and you pick a permission, so it's read by default. If you give a permission, read is mandatory, and then you could include collaboration and write. So write is optional, or collaboration is optional as well, but most of the users would go for read and collaborate, and write will be only to a specific group of people. So this could be done at a package, like individual package level, and you can configure different teams, different users for each of these packages. And finally, when the user logs in, so you could assess, or you could kind of ascertain what a user will see as at the end of the day. So a BPM team, these are the 2 packages that they will get to see. And APM team, these are the packages and these are the permissions that they will get to see. So there we have this full set of packages shortlisted to be shown in Prolaborate. these access permissions is what will determine what a user who is part of this group will be able to see. So APM team is different, BPM team is different, strategy team is going to be different. So, and they have different permissions as well. So you could see read, write, collaborate, or read, collaborate in certain access. So if you want to see where these are coming from, you could just browse and find what you have configured as well. This is just to validate that all the configuration that you have done is in place. Okay, so these two steps are pretty much what determines what an end user will get to see. So I'll just show you. I'll go to the home. These are like the my diagrams, and all the features that we see from now will depend on what we did in the first two steps. But still, I'm just going to start with the project browser view. So the project browser view, which in Prolaborate, we hardly use the project browser view because we don't want people to be navigating through folders and subfolders to find something. There's much more intuitive ways to let them find their relevant information. But just to show you that this is an administrator's view, so I'm pretty much seeing all the packages out here. But if I look at the same for another user, so here I've got someone like Felix, I think it's part of the BPM team, I suppose. And if I look at their project browser, okay, so let me just see another user. Andy. So you could see there are different contents being shown. So the requirements and the use cases packages are missing from here. And this user will derive permissions from all the groups that he belongs to. So it's all been taken care of. So it's a one-off setup that you do. And they will inherit whatever permissions they get from different being associated with different groups. Now these two steps are really important, and people usually have a few queries. So this looks like a lot of manual effort to configure, and how am I going to do when new users are onboarded? So I'm going to define the users and user groups in my Prolaborate project. So there are, for example, I got users and user groups, so I can add users, and then I can have user groups, and to user groups I can assign users. And the first thing people ask is, it looks like there's a lot of work in managing users because these permissions are all assigned to a user group, but how do I make sure it's simplified? Like I've got a user who is coming through SSO. Okay, I'm opening this Prolaborate to the entire team, and I've restricted the access based on an SSO group, let's say a SAML group or an Active Directory group, and I want them all to somehow be onboarded without me doing the manual work of assigning them to groups and users. And yes, that's definitely possible. So what we have in Prolaborate is there's something called access control profiles. This is more for admins, but what we are talking about looking at here is, you could say if someone is coming through SSO, which group do they get assigned to automatically? If they're coming from a specific group in a SAML, which group do they get assigned to? So you have some pre-configured onboarding rules that also can be configured. And with that in place, you just share the link to the users. You do not create users manually, and you do not have to do any configuration to add them to the groups. They log in through SSO. They get, they will have to go through the multi-factor authentication or anything of that sort that your organization would have standardized on, and they get assigned to a specific group as per your configuration. And once they log in, they get to see what is assigned to them specifically. So it is all kind of made really easy and simple, so that people will not it's more for the administrators overheads as well. So we play both users role and administrators role while defining the user experience. And this is a one-off configuration. If some packages are set up, access permissions are set up, the users onboarding will become easier, and all the views and dashboards that they get to see are all kind of pre-canned, so you don't have to do them manually every time. Now, so just going back to the slides. So the first step was about getting better focus, and this better focus is primarily done with these two steps. So sections and access permissions. And what you will see here is when the user uh, accesses this portal, they could either be landing in the diagrams page or the dashboards page. Okay, so you could determine what is their user experience. So they could either come to the diagrams page or the dashboards page. In most scenarios, when people are starting with Prolaborate, new, they wouldn't have time to do all the dashboards. All they want is, hey, I've got a group of people. I've classified them as personas or groups in Prolaborate, and I want them to see the diagrams that are relevant to them. And I'm not yet into an experience creation yet. So what is the dashboard? It's about creating a specific experience for them, with the literature, with the story and things like that. I'll come to it in a moment, in the next hour. But the first experience is my diagrams, and this my diagrams is also a subset of what this user can see. This is not all the hundreds and thousands of diagrams that that are in Prolaborate, sorry, that are in Enterprise Architect, but rather the packages which are assigned to me, packages for which I've been given access control. Those are the packages. I mean, these diagrams come from those packages and nothing else. And everything in this interface is kind of confined around what is shown here. For example, if I go to this filter by type, so it's all to make the user experience easy. Okay, the user doesn't have to navigate through hundreds of packages to find find what is relevant to them. If they come to this my diagrams page, they will be only seeing the filters applicable to the list of diagrams that are visible to them. So if I want to look at a couple of just business process diagram, I just say, show me the business process diagrams, and this shows me a thumbnail of all the diagrams that are relevant to me. And please bear in mind, these are diagrams coming from Enterprise Architect. So live diagrams coming from Enterprise Architect. So there's no manual publishing effort, or there is no additional overhead in converting your EA model to Prolaborate. One-off setup, and they just filter and they get to see, okay, I want to look at launch product. This diagram comes straight from your EA model, and it is all about getting your user to look at this diagram in the easiest way or the shortest way possible, and also showing this without intimidating them with hundreds of menus and docked windows and floating bars and things like that. There's a web browser, they click on something, they land in a diagram that we think is relevant to them. And if I just go back to my diagrams page, the filters is quite a powerful thing. For example, like users may not really know whether it's a UML component diagram or a UML activity diagram. That's another problem. That's where we go to dashboard. So if we are talking about users who would be less who would less bothered about UMLs and BPMNs, we have the dashboards for them, which will reduce the complexity even more. But for someone who can relate to these simple diagram types, these are also quite a handful. We are not expecting all these kind of type diagrams to be shown to the users. It'll be like hardly a few, and they could just filter, and then they could apply further filtering as well. So if they want to apply further filtering, it's just as simple as selecting and applying a filter. It's we are not again typing any queries. We're not doing any complex operations to find what we want. In its simplest form, you could even search by name and find them. So it's all made easy for them to access it. But behind the scene, what we are looking at is a full-fledged enterprise architecture repository. So this is not as complex as you would see in your environment probably, but this is the EA model that Prolaborate is connected to. And this model has a fair bit of details. So I would say, it has the TOGAF ADM implemented, all the way from vision to BA, IT layers and governance and things like that. And each of these layers have For example, business domain has customer journeys, processes, org charts, and the application domain has applications, services, and application functions. So there's quite a few packages and details in this, and these are highly interconnected as well. So I take any part of this model, I'll be able to navigate through the entire architecture repository. So I'm here at the launch product BPMN diagram, came from a customer journey, and from here I'll be able to go to the applications or to the infrastructure. So it's all an interconnected, fully defined, fairly complex enterprise architect model. But this is good for an architect. So if I look at this interface, I don't feel intimidated. I feel like this is the best thing to do. I don't mind there are 7 different tabs and 4 different property sheets. That's all fine for me. But for someone who is not comfortable with such an interface and they just want to look at a diagram, the same diagram, this is where Prolaborate comes into picture, and the number of steps to get there is also really reduced and simplified. So this will be the first part of it, getting better focus for the users. And what we see here is there is the next step is, how do I simplify what is shown? For example, I'm clicking on a process or an activity, and I'm only showing them a small subset of the full details that BPMN allows or EA allows. So I'm just clicking on a BPMN activity in EA, and you could see that there are quite a few sheets, and then even in the tag values there's I think 68 of them for a BPMN 2.0 activity. But all that doesn't matter for a user. All they would like to see is what is important to them, and this form can be tailored to the user group, to the users, to let them see what is relevant and also edit what we want them to edit. So that will be the next step of simplifying what is being shown. Okay, so I think that's the first part of it, and I think we just have 10 minutes. We'll maybe take a short break now, like a 10 minutes break, and we'll come back at the top of the hour to continue.
Sure, Nizam. So I have a question to launch as a poll. So if participants are available, they can just vote it.
So questions like a poll, is it? Okay, right. Okay, you can share them. But yeah, so we'll resume in 10 minutes.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Naval, can we resume?
Yes, Nizam. We can start.
Okay. Thank you. So welcome back, and in the first session what we are looking at is how to have better focus, how to have a better focus for the stakeholders by just showing selected parts of the model. We got some questions which I was going through during the break. There are questions about how do I set up dashboards, like permissions to dashboards. We'll be covering that. And there are some questions about the meta model definitions and things like that. I'll give more information in the by the end of this session or in the teams on references along those lines, or more videos along those lines. And then there are some questions around, can you control visibility to a project by a status or a tag? That is not a possibility now in the My Diagrams view, but there are other ways to do it, which I'll show you in the curation part. That's a really valid suggestion, but My Diagrams cannot be controlled with the tag, rather it's by access permissions. But that's a really good suggestion. And then Bob has asked if you could show the nodes of an element with a child diagram. So I'll be showing you the nodes part and what a child diagram and how is the child diagram shown to an end user and how he or she can navigate. But if that doesn't answer, I'll provide more insights in the Teams chat as well. So I think that's just a quick glance of some of the questions, and we'll be reconnecting towards the end of the session with more questions. But we'll just move to the next use case, which is simplifying. So first thing, we have eliminated, or we have just selected the parts of the model that we want to show, but that's not it. That's not solving all the problem. Like I said, an enterprise architect model could be really complex. Like I mean, try not to use this word, but it's fairly comprehensive. Like there's going to be a lot of things shown to a user when he or she manages to click on an object, but that's not all relevant. Like not everything is going to be relevant to everyone. You need to really identify things that are important. For example, from here, let me just switch to the just jump to an application diagram. So I'm just going from here to an application diagram. Oops, it's here. So I'm just going to an application portfolio or application diagram where I got a number of applications from my application inventory. So I've got a catalog of all Archimate application components in my EA model, and each one of them will have a whole list of tag values which I have finalized. So I have kind of chosen to be included in my meta model, and I've standardized it. So every COTS application that I'm modeling will have all these tag values. And I want my users to look at this. I want them to understand the life cycle of this application by looking at this model. I want them to understand when is it going to be sunset by looking at this model. But that's the hardest part. Like now I show this to a user, how do they navigate and find it? Like that's also going to be a challenge, and that's where the next part, which is simplifying further the information that's been shown, comes into picture. And each one of these objects could have different metadata. For example, this in my example, I've got two sets of applications: a business application, which in this example, these are applications that I have imported from ServiceNow. So this is a real use case. So we are as part of the consulting work, most of the work that we do will have some integrations from external tools, and one of the most popular one is ServiceNow. So we import ServiceNow applications, and that's part of my application inventory. And I've got COTS applications, which is technically the things that I model manually, and both are pretty much used in the same way when it comes to my architecture. So it's all connected to my processes and projects and data and technology stack. So it doesn't matter whether it's a business application or a COTS application, the metadata will differ, but in essence it kind of fits in the same place as the other application, and it's connected to the rest of the architecture as well. Now I've done all this work, I've got all this really good information. How do I now articulate this to the users? And that's where the simplifying part and the curation part both acts together. But let's start with the simplifying part. And what we mean by simplifying, it's showing or hiding just the relevant attributes. Like I mentioned, it could be based on BPM and UML or anything else, or your own custom metadata. But what will that user or a user group want to see? Again, Prolaborate goes a long way into this. Like in sense, it's not one size fits all. I can't say someone in the project management team and someone in the application management team or the IT SOM will be interested to look at the same information. So what Prolaborate will allow you to do is you can define a view for each role. So a project management team could have a different form that they see, and an IT SOM will have a different form that they see. A data architect could have a different form that they see. So it's role specific forms that you can build using Prolaborate. And in a nutshell, I was just showing the same example previously. So a process modeler's view is much more comprehensive. It has way more information than what a business user can understand. And similarly, there are a lot of metadata as well, which is very important to bring the model's value to the external world, but it's kind of hidden deep somewhere in the architecture repository. And now coming to designing the view for the users, in Prolaborate we call the form designers or the modeling languages, and they are basically designed or implemented in a way that if you have standardized your EA practice using MDG, so for people who are EA users, you may already know MDG technology is a way that you could standardize your meta model in Enterprise Architect. That will include the types of artifacts that you would like to use, the colors, the look and feel, the shape of the objects that you want to use, and it will also finalize the tag values and the connectors that goes between these artifacts. So an MDG technology is a really good starting point if you want to just lift and shift what you have designed for EA into Prolaborate. So if you just import your MDG technology, like, I'm sorry if someone is not really aware of what an MDG means, we'll connect in the discussion and I'll explain to you more and I'll give you more references. But for people who already know it, this is a result of a standardization exercise that we will do in Enterprise Architect. So our starting point is this. So you could just load your MDG technology, which means it will already have a list of tagged values that are assigned to a stereotype, and the form will just take MDG definition and show you these are the tagged values and these are the the normal details that you can see for this particular stereotype. However, even if you don't have an MDG, that's fine. So in my example, I'm going to work with an assumption that I do not have an MDG technology. I'm using BPMN, I'm using Archimate out of box from EA to do my model. But how do I make use of something like a form designer to kind of build that simplified view for my end users? And I'll just switch to my Prolaborate to show that. Just have my Prolaborate open. So the end users experience is this. As I said, if I click on a process or an activity or a decision node or whatever, as a modeler, we can determine what gets shown to the users. So here, instead of showing them the 68 or odd tagged values from BPMN and showing them 10 different forms or sheets that they have to navigate through, clicking on it and they get to see the details that they are interested in. So you could see that I've just got the name, the description, the author, and some process specific attributes. And the process specific attributes, the task type is a BPMN attribute, but then applications is a ref good. It's a custom tag value that I want or I have created for BPMN activity because I want to connect an application to these processes, and I'm doing it through a BPMN, EA tag value. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little technical here because I'm kind of catering to the EA users in this forum as well. So if you're using a ref good tag value, that's exactly what this is. And then there is a cost and effort. So there are two additional tags. And all this is something that I do in an EA model on a day-to-day basis. But this is something I'm presenting to the users, and I am letting them edit this information as well. But even while editing, I'm just allowing them to just edit the documentation, but I can't, I'm restricting them from editing the name, and I'm allowing them to kind of edit the task type, but not editing the cost. So I can, to that level of granularity, determine what gets shown and what can be edited. And how do we do this? As I said, so there's something called modeling languages. So all the options are here. And we hit that problem as well. As we were adding more features, we were adding more menus as well. And we just took a pause and thought, okay, aren't we going into the same trap of adding more ribbons, more menus, and changing them in every new release, which is something that most of the EA users are familiar with? We decided we're not going to go that route. Let's look at what some of the modern tools are doing. So we looked at Chromes and Firefoxes, and they are organizing like hundreds of options but without confusing people. So we kind of taken the same approach. So everything could be searched. So you just type what you want, and that particular option will come up. Of course, you need to know what to type, but it's we've got help and references to give you that idea of what you have to look for. But once you know what you're looking for, you don't have to search under multiple ribbons and multiple menus to find what you want. So I'm just typing modeling languages, and I'm going to this page. And as I said, I'm just using BPMN and Archimate instead of using any of my custom MDG, which is what I always use. But for the purpose of this training, I have reverted back to the basic profiles that are supported by EA out of the box. So now I'm going to take BPMN. I'm clicking on BPMN, and the BPMN kind of tells me I can have multiple profiles. So what I mean by profiles, as I said, there could be different forms for different user groups. Okay, so I'm not getting to that level of details now, but this is for your information. If there is a requirement for it, Prolaborate will allow you to do it. So you could assign user groups to a form, and that user group will see that form. Like we'll see what a form is in a moment. But here I've just got the default profile, and once I click on the default profile, Prolaborate shows me these are all the types from BPMN. So you could create a BPMN activity, you could create a BPMN business process, you could create a category. So these are all BPMN types, and for each of these types I can just click and say I want to design what my end users get to see. See, out of the box, none of these configurations are required. You can just start working with Prolaborate. That will just show all the details that EA has. These are all not mandatory configuration that you need to do, but these are really good to do because this simplifies the user experience multi-folds. So I've got a BPMN activity, and I've got the whole list of BPMN tag values at my disposal. So I can always, so these are all the BPMN tag values, and if I want to just add something to my form, I just drag and drop. And if I want to give something that's meaningful, that's in English, that a people or a user can understand, so I can give a tooltip, and I can even change the form name, so I don't have to stick to some scientific notation that the MDGs come with. So I can even change this, I can say what is the name of the property that I'm displaying to the users, and I can also give a tooltip for it, and then I can determine whether I want it to be editable or not. So I can say I don't want it to be editable. So this is the form. So there are these basic attributes, like basic properties that you'll see in the first screen of EA. So if I double click on an object, these are the basic properties. Not everything is going to be relevant to all the artifacts. So that's your basic attributes to choose from. And then you have the technology specific attributes to choose from. And lastly, if you have defined your tag values in Enterprise Architect, you could just export those tag values and import them into Prolaborate, and that will give you the full list of tag values that you have in your EA model. And from there, you just drag and drop what you want to see in this particular artifact as well. So again, I would like to re-emphasize that here we are not talking about queries or scripts or anything like that. These are all graphical drag and drop. Of course, these are configurations which could be seen as an additional effort, but this is going a long way in terms of defining your user's experience. So I've just confirmed this as my BPMN activities form, and now the next time, so now bear in mind I haven't got any user group assigned to it. This is like generic for all the users who access Prolaborate now, and I'm just going to look at a business process, click on an activity, and what you see here is exactly the form that I just updated. So I've got the activity type and the tooltip. So pretty much what I defined in the form is what is shown to the users, and I've got name and documentation. So this is actual EA model. So if I update it here, it gets updated in the model as well. And likewise, I could choose task type. I could change. I mean, applications is not modifiable. It's a read-only property. But what you'll see is, again, we have really focused on at the like to the wire. So this is a ref grid, and a ref grid should be clickable. User should be able to navigate, not just list it as a grid. So here, this, for example, I've got an application called Login. I click on it, I get taken to that particular application, and I can see all its details. It's these pages are also refined in such a way that it only shows relevant information. So these ref goods are also given a proper experience that it is meant to be given, and people could click and navigate and find you could start navigating from here. So here I've got my logman, and then I just click on the diagram where it's been used, and then I could keep going. So I could just navigate from there, find its traceability. So pretty much everything you do in an EA model could be done except diagram editing in Prolaborate. But the starting point is catered to a user who we assume will not do any of this. So we are assuming that the user who uses the Prolaborate will not do any of these. It's an EA modeler's task, but we have the interface catered for the modelers as well, like in sense of navigating and doing complex stuff. I hope I'm making sense so far. So this step of defining a form is really handy, and as I said, it could be specific to a stereotype. So let me just change my view. I'll just go back to my set of diagrams, and let me look at another EA diagram. So this is an EA diagram where I've got a list of COTS applications, and I click on a COTS applications. Here, this is another form, and this form again shows me the list of tags or key metadata that I have captured in EA. So this, for example, PPM is what I'm looking at. PPM has a list of tags, and to find those tags, you obviously have to go through a couple of hops to find it. But what we have got in Prolaborate is I click on the object, I get to see what I want the end users to see, and I am a admin here, so I'm looking at this as an admin, so that I have a option to edit this from here. So I don't have to go menu, modeling languages, archivate, application component, and then do it. I'm here, I'm looking at it, and I feel okay, I could change this form. I just click on open form designer. That'll open me the Archimate 3.1, which is where this stereotype is coming from, and it shows me the application component for which I'm defining this experience, and it shows me the form that I wanted, that I have got defined for it already. And here I could just look at all the custom attributes that I want to see in it and just drag and drop and update this form. Okay, so this is in essence, we have made it as easy as possible for the architects to define the user experience that the users they want to show to the users. And if you click on something, an object which has a composite, so this is a composite object. You could see this small infinity symbol in EA. This means there's a composite object and there's a diagram in it. You cannot explain this to a user. So you can't explain to a user to say, hey, search for this small thing and then double click on it. But what Prolaborate will do is you click on it, it shows you there is a linked diagram. We have again tried to make it as easily understandable by someone who doesn't have any EA background. So open the link diagram, click on it, that will take me to the linked diagram. You would see that there is consistently these pop-ups being shown in every diagram. I'll come to it in the collaboration part, but that's a key aspect here. Wherever you go, you will see discussions and collaborations that are corresponding to that particular diagram or particular object. So we'll come to this in the next part, but ability for a user to just click on it, look at its details, and if there is a complex like a nested diagram, jump to it. If not, if they want to navigate to a page that is specific to LDAP, for example, I just click on open, that will open the page specific to LDAP. And what you see here is this is again the form that you have defined for it. So you will never see information overload. Once you define it at the repository level. This is what I want to show for an application. That's what is shown everywhere. So here I've got the list of properties that I've defined, and it also shows me the usage and traceability, which is also something that people are quite interested in. And if I want to go from here and navigate to a diagram, I do that. So I just click on it and I navigate to the diagrams in EA. So this is pretty much like, start from somewhere and you keep navigating through the model. But that starting point is always made really easy. Okay, so that is the access, the forms designing, and this ways to include traceability and usage. These are all quite handy because you are just offering everything in a platter in one page. You're not asking people to navigate, find a ribbon, find a toolbox and dock it somewhere, find some properties window and dock it somewhere and then look at it. So that's all something that we are not focusing on. We are just saying this, click on it, you get to see what is important for you. So that's all about defining the profiles, or getting that experience to the user in a simplified manner. And another thing that I have already shown, which also fits in the simplifying experiences, the my diagrams thing. As I said, we covered this in the previous section, but the my diagrams is quite a convenient thing. This was one of the first and foremost feature that people appreciated and started using, because this makes the end users experience to find what is relevant to them a lot easier. You're not talking about complex project browsers or navigation panes to click and navigate through. You're just offering everything in a platter. So they log into a portal, they get to see what is relevant to them, they click on it and they start working on it. So that's the simplify use case for us. And now moving to the third use case, which is curation. So we've been just looking at eliminating or reducing the complexity and getting the information as is to the end users. But now we're going to step up a little bit and say, hey, I've got so much modeled in Enterprise Architect. So I take an application here. Every single application, I've spent a lot of time to capture its metadata. So I've got so much of data in here, which should be driving insights. I've got, for example, all the connectors modeled in Enterprise Architect. So I'll just, for example, take PPM as a start and say, show me everything that's connected to it. Any EA model for that matter will have this kind of an information. So you got applications connected to capabilities, to business processes, to projects, to data. There is there's infrastructure missing here, but it could be connected to pretty much all the layers above and beyond. And each of these objects will also have its own connection. So for example, it's part of strategy and planning and strategy business management. So I'm just saying a capability will have connections to a value. This is just my example, but you can relate to it in your context. So I've got a capability hierarchy. I've got L1, L2, L3 capabilities, and the capabilities are connected to business values. So it's part of the value chain. From value, I'll be able to navigate to the capability that is connected to it and all the applications that are fulfilling or being used to fulfill such a capability. And I've got a hierarchy of capabilities. So I've got L1, L2, L3. This is a typical like a EA model. I've got information in every touch point. I take a BPMN process. Are we able to go from here and say, okay, this is the L2 process that I'm talking about, which will be connected to an L1 process, which could be connected to a business service. So there's going to be lots and lots of details in these EA models. But how do I make all this information, in a way that a non-EA user can understand it? And that's where Prolaborate's the extended value comes into picture, and that's what we call it curation. So in terms of curating it, the first thing we are going to talk about are the like how do we convert all the data, like I just spoke about it, like the tagged values and interrelationships. These are the actual crux of the model. It's not diagrams. Of course, diagrams are an important part of the model, but the real value is the tagged values and interrelationships. How do I really make that, convert that into something that could drive business decisions, that could drive insights for users who intend to use it? So this diagram conveys a lot of information for an architect, but what does it mean to a person who doesn't understand architecture? So that's what we are going to look at now. The first thing we'll be starting with is personalized dashboards. So a dashboard in Prolaborate is something that you as an architect or anyone who has permission to define dashboards can define. So each group can be given permission to define dashboards, and whichever group has permissions to define dashboards, they can come up with something of their own. And these dashboards are assigned to individual users or user groups. So what that means is, when I log in as a user who is part of, let's say, application portfolio management group, I only get to see those dashboards which has been assigned to the APM group. And what I can do as an architect, what we can do as an architect is, I can say, for an application APM team, I want this dashboard to be the default. Okay, so this is a lot of control, as you can imagine. I can say I want 5 dashboards to be shown to them, but when they log in, I want them to land in a particular dashboard so that they could go from here and explore the rest. So this, for example, could be the dashboard for the BPM team. And what I'm showing here is, there is a high-level, diagram where there's a business object and a Archimate business process, but then that kind of opens into an, a L1 business process diagram and the applications that are relevant to that process diagram. So when a person from the BPM team, let's say, logs in, they are not shown a complex project browser. They're not shown hundreds of diagrams. They are given this dashboard to start with and navigate across. So that's what a dashboard is. And a dashboard could have EA diagrams, EA packages, EA objects as thumbnails, as links. So these are some basics, but then you can also have images and text boxes and links to, let's say, video channels or your wiki pages. It could be a multi component in this dashboard. It's not just diagrams, it's not just reports, it's not just a couple of chats. It could be a mix and match of any of these. And once you have those dashboards in place, that's the step one. So let me just show a quick demo of how to define dashboards. So if I go to again, I'm using as an administrator so that I have all the permissions to operate. And to define a dashboard, I go from here. I mean, there are multiple ways to do it, but then the easiest is click on the dashboards, and then I say create something new. And let's say I call this training dashboard. What I could then do is, I could also make this as a template. So there's another thing like reusability. That's a lot of work that we have done to make these things reusable as well. This was one of the major change from 3.x to 4. So 3.x to 4 of Prolaborate has a story. There's been like at least 2 years of efforts to do the 4, which is almost like a rewrite of the entire application to make it faster, more cloud ready, more scalable, and also make it more reusable and friendlier. So we learned from the feedback that our the previous the customers, the early customers shared, and we have incorporated all of them to our best ability to come up with something that's faster, leaner, more scalable, and also more user friendly. So one of the focus areas of Prolaborate 4 is to make everything reusable, so that you define it once and kind of apply it in multiple contexts. So I'm just going to start with the training dashboard, and the next thing I can do is click on this to add a new widget. As I said, templates are going to be seen everywhere in 4, so you could add from a template as well, but I'm just going to add a new widget. So dashboards are comprised of widgets, and the widgets could be just the simple ones like a text or an image or a piece of HTML as well. So people even insert iframes to YouTube videos, provided your security allows it. But we could do that as like adornments to the dashboard. But then you can have hyperlinks. So hyperlinks is something that you could say, click on it and take me to the package or to the diagram or to the element. So and you can have a hyperlink, or you could have diagram thumbnails. So let me start with the diagram thumbnail. So I'm clicking on add, and then the next thing you see is it shows you the parts of the model that you have access to. Once again, this is not the full exhaustive list of packages that we are talking about. We are just talking about the packages that I have access to. And then let's say I want to just search for, let's say, business process diagrams, and I give search, it quickly searches and shows me the business process diagrams in this. And let's say I want to click on launch product and say select, and the next thing I have to just do is resize it as per my preference. Then it's all about me defining it. So I could say, this is the launch product process. What we usually do is we even add a text along with it, just in case if you want to give some literature around it. So documentation or notes about this process. Like, I know there is going to be a process on, notes on the diagram as well, but this is something additional just to guide your users on what they should do with this diagram. Like, we are catering to people who are completely oblivious to this architecture and all this fancy things. So we are just talking about people who want to click on something and understand it, and you can guide them with those text, the additional text or notes as well. So I'm just going to click on this training dashboard, and that's pretty much it. So I've just added one diagram thumbnail, and I've got the diagram thumbnail here. And what you see here is I could do a couple of things. This is where, again, these are new in Prolaborate 4. I could just share this one widget. I mean, we'll come to sharing in the next part, but sharing was not this granular in the previous version. We were able to share the diagrams, we were able to share an element, but now we have brought it down to pretty much every small component of Prolaborate 4 so that you can share them. But just over it, you have an option, just in case if you feel the model has changed, you just click quick refresh and this widget will refresh and fetch the latest diagram. You can share them, you can just view it, you click on view, or you just click on the thumbnail, that will also take you to the view, but that brings you the live diagram from EA. So you navigate from a dashboard to that particular diagram, and from here it's the normal use case. So I just click on it, I get to see the properties. So pretty much same standard use cases. And this test dashboard will be only visible, sorry, not the test dashboard, it's the training dashboard that I was talking about. So that will be only visible to the super admin who defined it now, rather than showing it to all. So if I go as another user, so let me just see as another user, I'm clicking on this user, and this is Andy. And if I look at the list of dashboards for him, you do not see the training dashboard here because I haven't given access to this user or the user group for the training dashboard. So this is only visible to me, and then I go to view all. So I'm just gonna, let's say, edit the training dashboard, and here one of the things you could do is access permissions. So I could assign to user groups, or I could assign to individual users. So I could assign to user groups, or I could assign to individual users, and only those users will be able to see these dashboards. So it gives you that kind of a control. So I think that was a question. I mean, at least 2 people had that question initially. You can assign dashboards to a specific group or a user as well. And the next thing we are going to look at is, firstly, we now took a quick glance at what we mean by dashboards. and what are the things that could go in a dashboard. But now we are going to see how we could use all the modeled information. Like I said, an application in a model could have metadata, could have interconnections, could have, like, other layers connected to it. And there is a, for example, if I take my EA model, if I want to tell my stakeholder, for the strategy and planning value, you've got a couple of capabilities connected to it. And for these capabilities, there are at least a couple of applications connected to it. That is the kind of an insight that I want to present to the users. So I have a diagram, for example, where the production business value is connected to these many capabilities, and each of these capabilities are connected to a number of applications. So all these are valuable information. An architect would have spent hours together to gather it, or like days or weeks or months together to gather it. But how do I convert it into something that's easy? And that's what you're going to see now. So this information where I've got application and its metadata, and in my example model, I'm switching between EA and Prolaborate, please excuse me, but I want to show you that an EA model, I have an application inventory, and this application inventory, as I said, I have business applications and I've got cards applications. These two have different metadata associated with it. For example, these are my modeled application and I have certain set of tag values with it. But these are applications that I probably imported from ServiceNow, and the metadata associated with it are different as well. Now, I want to eliminate all this additional complexity. To my end users, I want to give a single view of my application inventory and just allow them to be able to find information based on all the metadata that we have captured here. So that's what a dashboard like this will serve. For example, instead of showing you in the slide, I'm going to go to actual Prolaborate. So this is Prolaborate once again. I'm just going to go to my APM dashboard, and in the APM dashboard, what I have done is I've taken the contents of two different packages with two different set of metadata associated with it and published them in a flat view. So this, for example, is the APM dashboard in my context, and I've got the set of business applications, and I'm explicitly saying, hey, these are coming from ServiceNow, but that that doesn't matter. And there's cards applications, and each of these are real-time interactive charts which are driven by the EA tag values. Okay, for example, I've got an application with lifecycle sunset, and if I want to understand the sunset applications, I just click on it, and that will take me to the three applications in my application inventory that have been marked as sunset in its lifecycle. So you could see that I have just converted all the data that I have captured in model, which is going to be highly useful for the end users, into something that anyone could traverse and identify. And clicking on each of these will open the same form that we have defined for an application. So it's one user experience throughout, whichever way we come to it. Similarly, I go back. Let's say instead of that, I want to understand the high critical applications. I just click on it. I get to be taken to the business applications. In this case, it's a ServiceNow application which matches my criteria. And if this chart is complex, like if you have like 15 different blocks in this chart, you can turn on, turn off things as well. So it's really intuitive and interactive, like you would expect in any modern tools. And we are not inventing anything here. This is something that you would have seen in Jira's, you would have seen in Excel's. So it's the same, but now we are operating on a real-time EA model information, and you do not have to do anything additionally like publishing or exporting it and importing into a BI application. This is all connected to your EA model, and as you update your EA model, it gets updated here. And then there are plenty of visualization options to help us do this. So these are, for example, some simple one-level charts. I'll show you how to define one of these, because the real focus for us while designing something like this is we want the architects to be able to design something like this without writing any queries and scripts. Okay, so we want to stay away from complex stuff. I mean I have a I would become nervous if I have to write something like that. I've just been spending 17 years with Sparx, but still, if I have to write a query, it will it's not the most comfortable position to be in. We want the people to be able to design these views with limited exposure to all the complex stuff. As long as they know there is a model, they should be able to design something like this. So that's our focus. And what I'll do is I'll just I'll just go to my training dashboard, and I'm going to add a new widget. Let's say I'm going to take my applications. So let me just look at my COTS applications. So each of my application has metadata, like business unit, cost, health indicator, life cycle, security classification, strategic importance. There's quite a few. Let me just build a view based on business unit. Now, all I know is I have a model somewhere in this big fat repository, and I created a couple of applications in it. There is a set of metadata associated with it. That's all I remember. Now, with that information, let's see how to define a chart. So I'm just going to say add a new widget. And when I add a new widget, so I'm going to look at the charts option. So in the charts option, I'm just going to say click. And this is kind of seeing if there are predefined reports. As I said, in Prolaborate 4, one of our focus has been to to make charts and widgets and reports reusable. I haven't got anything for this training yet, but what I get to see if I say, I don't have any predefined reports, is the different types of charts that I can use. The pies and donuts and bars, stack bars, columns and stack columns. These are all the basic charts that you will see. Bubbles has its own application. Word map has its own application. But each of these are either a one variable chart or two variable charts. But let me start with the simplest one. Let's say a pie chart. And what I want to do is I could search and find what I want, but I'm just going to navigate to my application repository, and I'm going to choose my application inventory and COTS applications. That's all. So I just choose this, and once I choose this, the interface will tell me you got Archimate application component in it. So you got, it will show you what are the different stereotypes available in this package. And you can further filter it as well. So you could say, I want to filter it by life cycle. Let's say I want to only show the production applications. That's also possible. But to keep it simple, I've chosen what types I want to report on. And then I'm going to say, I want to build a chart based on business unit. And my business unit is a tag value. So I'm saying build it based on tag values. I just click on it. It will show me what are the tag values that are applicable to application components. Please bear in mind, I'm not using any MDG or any custom profile here. I'm just using the standard Archimate notation to model, and this is just fetching me all the tags that are applicable in my current model for an application component. And then I'm going to say business unit is what I want to build this chart on, and then I go next. This is an option for advanced users. I've been repeatedly saying I do not, we do not want the architects to write queries, but that said, we are working with EA modelers who are so well versed with EA, and they would like to do more than just what the designer offers them. And they could start from here. They could just say, edit this auto-generated query, in which case they cannot go back and use the designer anymore. But from here, they could just edit and take this query, modify it. They could run the query and see if it works. So it's for the advanced users, not for me. I'm just going to go next. And what it shows is here is where you could customize it. So you could add a name to the legend. You could do the basic settings for pies. Basic settings for numbers and formats and things like that, but I'm just going to leave them as is and say save. and I'm just going to make this big enough. Okay, it's up to me what I want to decide. I mean, what I want to do, and then I just say save. Go back to my training dashboard. And what you'll see is I've got my thing based on business units. So I've got corporate center, customer. So if I feel like it's crammed, I want to see in a full maximized view, I just click maximize, and that takes me to a maximized view. I've got group services, strategy and enterprise, and customer and business services. And then if I want to just click on customer and business services, I get taken to the list of applications that fits that particular criteria. I click on it and I get to see its properties. So it's that simple. So I just built a dashboard or a chart with a couple of clicks without getting into any of those nuances of queries or scripts. And if I go back to my application portfolio dashboard, pretty much each of these charts were designed based on that. And then there are some additional options as well. For example, a roadmap. This is also built entirely based on EA models, nothing more than that. But what I have in my EA model to do a roadmap is I've got tag values to indicate the go live date and a sunset date. So, I've just got 2 dates. You could have it, you could call them anything, but you could define a roadmap of your EA artifacts, group them based on tag value. So here I've grouped my applications based on the tag value called vendor, and it just shows me based on the start date and end date. Similarly, I also have the additional chart. So this is quite popular when they do the APRs to identify which applications are of high importance, and the TCO is also optimal. So this is simple bubble chart. And how am I building this? I've captured the information that goes behind in a tag value again. So I've got my strategic importance and the total cost of ownership captured as tag values, and with just these 2 parameters I'll be able to build a bubble chart like this. So it's now just about you maintaining a consistent model, and then Prolaborate could just make it into something that's really easy for people to understand and for yourself to do some due diligence and analysis. Okay, and the next thing that I would like to show in terms of curation is we've only seen one level. So I've got application and all its metadata. Now that's great, but I've got complex interrelationships. How do I display something like that? For example, I've got a capability map. I've got a business capability map, which has got L1, L2, L3, which I've done in EA. This looks great. How do I do something like this in Prolaborate? This looks great, but this is manually done. I've been dragging and dropping objects within another object, and I've been trying to build this view, and if the model changes, it's pretty much a manual effort to change it. And this is one dimension. Let's say if I want to do another diagram where I want to show from a business value to a capability to an application, I wouldn't have an option to do it. There is another diagram that I need to do. But in Prolaborate, what you could do is build something like this. So for example, in this dashboard, I've got L1, L2, L3 capabilities. So this is the business capability that I just showed you here, L1, L2, L3 capabilities. But the difference is this is auto rendered, auto generated based on a simple configuration, and it's also highlighting the objects or the capabilities based on the tag values that I wanted to use. For example, I've got a criticality tag value which indicates it's a low, medium, and high, and I'm using that to color code it. So in each of these capabilities, I've got L1, L2, L3, and in L3 I've applied a heat map based on criticality. What this allows me to do, the end user could just they could minimize it, maximize it. They could literally interact with the data and understand what they would like to see, what is important to them. And furthermore, they could even filter it. For example, if I don't want to see all the medium priority items here, this is quite a few, I just click on it, it turns it off. it turns it off and it just shows me the high and low criticality capabilities. So you're taking a capability map that I've built in EA using aggregations and hierarchies and just rendering it in a view that users could just interact and understand. And this is another view where I've got a different dimension to it. Here I've got business values connected to business capabilities, and then to the applications, which is the view that I just spoke about here. So there's got value to capability, and capability is connected to application, and the capability is always at L3. So business value is connected to an L3 capability, and an L3 capability is connected to an application. So that model consistency is important. As I said, the first thing I mentioned is about model consistency. Only with that are we able to present something like this. So I've got a business value, marketing and sales, that's connected to marketing management, order management, and sales management. And then order management is connected to a couple of applications. So that information with complex relationships is now shown to a user either in this format, or there are multiple other ways as well. For example, another view, this is the same information, business value to capability to application, but I'm just saying I want to understand production value, it's connected to these capabilities, and I want to understand this capability, it's connected to this application. So it's just all converted into something that you don't have to be an architect to be able to interact with it and find out what is important. Okay, so I think it's time. We'll probably take a short break, like a 10 minutes break, and we'll come back and see how I can define a view like this without much ado. Like, it's not going to be again scripting or querying. It's simple interfaces that will probe your model and will show you how to define these multi-level charts. So we'll just take a break and we'll come back in 10 minutes and continue.
Thanks, Nizam. So I'm just going to post another poll. I'll close the poll in another 30 seconds. Also, if you have any questions, please drop your queries in the chat, or you can also post it in our Teams channel. If you have any issues accessing our Teams channel, please write to the email registrations at eaglobalsummits.com. Summit.com, yeah. Thanks for the response. So we'll resume in another 9 minutes. Nizam, we can start now.
Thanks, Nabil. Thanks once again for people staying back. We'll continue. So just before the break, we were just looking at how these, hierarchical information or cross-layer information. So any of these connectors pretty much can be, presented in a way that it eliminates these connectors and hops, but just provides the insights to the users. And we were looking at this multi-level capability chart to start with, and I'm just going to start with this to define something like this, the kind of efforts that an architect should do. And I'll just go quickly to my model to show you. I've got my L0 capabilities, I've got my L1 capability, and I've got my L2 capabilities in separate packages, and they are connected with aggregation connectors. So this is something that one should be aware of. So each one of this is connected by an aggregation connector That's my EA side of it. And there could be, you know, other things as well. For example, an L2 capability could be connected to an application. It could also be connected to business values. For example, like, you know, there are all this information in my EA model. Now, if I want to go and define a hierarchy to represent my L1, L2, L3 capabilities, how do I go about it? So I'm just going to go to my training dashboard. I'm going to define or click edit, add new, and this time I'm going to do a chart, but instead of the single level charts that we spoke about, like a pie, dotted, bar. So the first 6 pretty much are single level charts with 1 or 2 parameters. And then the bubbles and roadmaps, as I mentioned, they are specialized charts for specific purposes. So if you have start dates and end dates, or if you have, like, you know, values like cost and significance, you could use these charts. But then these 3 charts down below, the heat maps, the nested pies, and the landscapes, these are the multi-level charts. So, you know, the definitions of all these 3 are pretty much the same. You just have to go from object A to object B to object C, and you can present them in pretty much either of these. But let me start with a landscape chart. And a landscape chart, you know, I just have to specify what my starting point is. So, you know, I'm just going to expand my business capabilities, and I'm going to say I want to go L0 capabilities. That's my starting point. So for this, we call the designer. So there are 2 ways to design a report. One is the designer view, or you could even go with the query view, like, you know, skip to query. So you could, instead of using the designer, you know, there are people, advanced EA users, who just prefer to, you know, go past this step and start writing their queries. Don't know how they do it, but they do it. Or they could have copied queries from the past and just use it. But once I choose a package, Prolaborate will go through the package and say, hey, you got these 2 types in the package, and I'm only interested in Archimate capability. So if I choose Archimate capability, then you know, I have a number of other options. I can color code it based on a tag value. I can filter it. So there are a few options which I'm going to park for now. And then I'm going to say add group 2. So group 2 is nothing but going from one level to another level. And how do I go from one level to another level? There should be some kind of a connection from one object to another object. And that's exactly what we're going to define now. As I showed you in my model, I've got an aggregation connector between my L0 to L1 and L1 to L2. So I'm just going to say I have incoming connectors, and that connector is of type aggregation. So I'm just choosing, because I have a grasp of what I have modeled. Okay, and this is where consistency is paramount. If I have an inconsistent connector type, if I have an inconsistent direction, it's not going to work as it should. No, it will work, but it's going to, you know, it's GIGO. That's all we will get. But here, I know it's consistent because I've got a meta model to which I'm modeling to. So I've got, you know, I'm saying incoming connector and its aggregation. The moment I say this, Prolaborate will say, okay, based on your configuration, I find a capability in the other end. Okay, so because I've chosen aggregation, the only way this object is connected to another object is, like, this object is connected to another capability through aggregation. So I've said source is this, connector type is aggregation. Then my target is automatically shown to me, which is capability. So I've got capability of this in the second level as well. Now I'm going to go and say add group 3. So in group 3, similar things. I know there's going to be an incoming connector, and the thing here is there are 2 types of connectors that Prolaborate is picking up, because from here there are 2 associations, and then there is an aggregation. So there are 2 types of connectors. I could choose association, in which I can pick between a value and an application, or I could choose aggregation. So I'm going to say aggregation, and once I say aggregation, it will say on the other end I find a capability again. Okay, if I chose a different type of connector, it will tell me what it is able to find in the other end. So I've got 3 levels defined, and just to make it more intuitive, like I'm just going to look at L3 and see, okay, I've got a tag value called criticality. I want to use this tag value at level 3 so that I will have a heat map applied, like a color coding applied on it. I'm just going to say color this level based on tag values. Once I say based on tag values, I click on this, it shows me the applicable tag values. So if you see this, I'm not remembering anything. It's showing me all this. I just have to know what I have to choose. I'm choosing criticality, and then that's pretty much it. So I've got 3 levels defined. That's pretty much the cap. You know, in Prolaborate 3, we used to go multi-level. So like, 5-6 levels, but that wasn't a adding a lot of value. B, it was just causing the charts to be terribly slow. Like, it was just too much of information to be fetched, and it wasn't really adding a lot of value. So we kind of defined it at level 3, or stopped it at level 3 purposely to just make it faster, and to cater to most of the use cases. And then go next. This is where the queries are. So these are just auto generated queries. It's converting the configuration from previous step to define these queries. And as an advanced user, if you intend to modify it, you can always modify it as well, but I'm not going to do that. Just moving on here, it then shows me I've got 3 levels of definition. So I'm going to say L0 capabilities, and then I'm going to say this is L1 capabilities, and these are L2 capabilities. So I'm just renaming the levels, and then I'm defining the colors. So these are some of the predefined colors, and as you could see, based on my previous step, it's saying the 3rd level is going to be color coded based on the tag value that I've defined. Okay, so I've just defined 3 levels of capabilities, and I've got some more some additional settings. So if you want to modify the font size and the font family, you can, but I'm just going to leave them all as is. There are 2 types of sorting, like a squarish or a rectangularish layout. It's been fine-tuned or optimized to give the best experience, but if there are scenarios where you would like to change them, you can always change them. And I'm going to save. This is going to be too cramped for it, so I'm just going to bring it over here and then maybe maximize it. So I'm just, oops, it's maybe not required, but I'm just trying to resize it in a way that I feel I see fit. So this is like the capability map, and I'll just save this and open the dashboard. So that's all the configuration that I had to do to get this chart in place. And these colors, I'll talk about these colors. These are standardized color representation. So you could see pretty much all the charts are driven from the same colors. This is one new feature of 4.0, 4.2 specifically. We used to have a lot of problems with this. Like, when I have personally also acted as a consultant implementing Prolaborate for users, and we have hit a problem where we define 10 different charts, and each of them will have its own colors. Like, there will be different shades of red, like red, green, amber. The colors were not consistent, and users were really getting confused with what do these colors really convey. In 4.2, what we have done is we have kind of made them all configurable at a repository level. So first thing you could do is, I'm in the modeling languages section, which is where most of this configuration is done. One of the things I could start with is a color palette. Like, if I have a corporate branding, like, some standard colors that I would like to see across my dashboards, pretty much everywhere. So these are not specific to one place, like reports, charts, forms, lists, everywhere. These are the colors that you will see. So I could define my own custom color palette and say this is the color, these are the colors I would like to use across my Prolaborate. So it's using this color palette across. That's why you're seeing this colors pretty much everywhere. And the next thing, which is even more granular, this is an advanced use case, by the way, but what you'll see is every single tag value is also configured at the highest level, like at a project level. So I can say wherever I see customer and business service, it's going to be this color. If I change it here, wherever I see customer and business service, it will take a different color. So you are just doing this configuration once. And because your profiles are standardized, because your tag values are standardized, you're not going to define a tag value every single time. You can always rely on these color configurations and just say, for example, criticality. I'm just going to say, instead of these standard colors, I'm going to use, I'm really bad with colors, but let me just see if I can try my luck. So red, gray. So I'm just making up here, and medium is, let's say, amber. So I'm just defining this once at the highest level, at the repository level, and from now on, wherever I see this, like if I have a dashboard, let me go to my training dashboard. I think I used this. Yeah. So here the criticality colors is now based on the one-off configuration that I did at the project space. So if I use a chart based on these three values, the chart will also be in the same color. So it's consistent across, wherever you see it. So if I click on this, if I, in the business capability, for example, in my capability, I haven't designed a form. So I'm just going to add my criticality to my capability. So criticality is something that I've modeled in my capability. So, it's all like similar words, but I'm just modifying my form so that when I click on a capability, I'll be able to see the criticality as well. And you could see the criticality, the colors in the form also reflects the same color configurations. This may not sound that important in the early stages, but as we start defining more and more dashboards and views, these colors tend to become a point of concern because it becomes random without a standardized configuration. This is one of the improvements that has gone, especially in 4.2. So that's something to understand. And what I've also done is in really few steps, I've designed a multi-level chart like this. And with Prolaborate 4, you can also switch this to other charts. So here the configuration is all white, so I don't see a lot of differences, but this is a nested pie chart, a heat map chart and the nested pie chart. The colors haven't been configured very well for this, but I can convert the same configuration into multiple charts. So this is a nested pie chart, which is also doing the L1, L2, L3. But because I've given white as a background for my landscape, everything is white. So if I had colors applied here, the other charts will also be readable. Maybe I'll just quickly do that to show, because someone has asked this question, what kind of charts are we using? So it's not one size, it's not one chart and you have to redo if you have to do another chart. It's like just configure it once, save it as a configuration as well if you want, and then just use it or render it in different ways as well. So I'm just defining some colors, some fill colors, which I'm really bad with, as I said. And the third layer, I don't have to apply colors because it's already color coded based on like the tag values. I think this one, I should probably get a better one, which, oops. Okay, save and save. So I'm just going to save this and come back to the training dashboard. So that's the full color that I just added. And with that, I'm going to switch this to a nested pie chart. So the color combination now place here. So the grays and blues, which I chose as a fill color, is being used here. But you could see that the same configuration could be converted into this, or like a nested tree map, which allows the same thing. So I'm starting with my L0 capabilities, clicking on this, going to my L1 capabilities, and then clicking on it, and I'm going to my L2 capabilities. Again, there are fine tunings that you could do for each of these charts. Like, do you want to display this text in the middle? What's the font size? What's the colors, etc., so on and so forth. But in a nutshell, the configuration is pretty much the same, and that's the effort that you have to, I mean, what I showed is the effort that you need to do to convert a multi-level chart into something like this. Okay, now just quickly going back to the predefined charts that I have. So you can see that I've just used this concept to define, like, you know, if I want to go from business value to capability to applications, it's pretty much the same. I just need to start with a value. I know it's going to be connected to a capability via association connector. Then I know this application is connected to a, sorry, this capability is connected to an application, again via an association connector. So as long as I know what my model is, I'll be able to build a view like this in no time. So I think we have spent a fair bit of time on curation, but that's one of the important aspects of Prolaborate. Like, you know, one thing I haven't done is the reports. So reports, for example, there's been a question, like I would have to explain more in, like, you know, in the Q&A session or post the session, where can I filter things based on tags or statuses? At the moment, we don't have it here to filter it by status or tags. But what we do is, while designing dashboards, we will, for example, I mean, so this is the workaround. It's not the answer for your query, but what we do is we define reports. So in the reports, again, there could be a predefined report as well. But let's say I'm just going to say I want to show all my, I could even show diagrams, but let me just stick to the same examples that I've been using, like application repository and cards applications. So in the cards applications, I'm just going to choose, let's say, like application component. I'm just going to show applications which has life cycle in production. So I'm just gonna design a filtered list of applications to be shown to my users. So I'm just gonna resize this a tad so that I see the list here. Training dashboard. So that's as simple as that, to define a list of applications that meets your criteria. So you imagine you are not writing query, you're not writing script. Again, I will reiterate this multiple times because that's the hardest part in defining things like this. Here, I got a list of applications with lifecycle production, and it shows all the different attributes that are relevant. Again, you don't see, you know, please notice that you only see the fields that you have designed in the form. You're not seeing all, you know, the unnecessary information here. You're only seeing the things that you have designed using the form designer. And furthermore, if they just click on it, they get to see its details as well. So it's, the report is a very convenient way to just show a table or a catalog of items to the users and just start their model exploration from here. So, you know, I could just click on each of these objects and explore my model as well. So the dashboards could be used in a variety of ways, and this could also be a set of diagrams. So I could say, for example, when there's a workaround for the query which asks about, can I show only the diagrams based on status and tags? No, not at the project level, but I can define a report or a widget like this which only shows diagrams and objects of specific types and specific statuses or tag values, and then I can let my users navigate my model through this as well. Okay, so that's pretty much, you know, about the curating aspect. So there, we have looked at what a dashboard is, like we have looked at some of the simple charts, like a single level charts. We looked at how to define a table like this in no time. I would have hardly taken less than 30 seconds to define a chart like that, but that's the effort. But the value out of it is quite significant. And these are all some of the charts that we also looked at. So that's the curation part. So we have looked at focus, simplification, curation, and the last part is engage. Like that's last, but that's one of the most important part. All that we have done, step 1, 2, 3, is to foster engagement. Like to get better interaction, better acceptance, we need to do all these steps. Without doing all these steps, if I just go slap a model on someone and say review it, I don't think we'll get the buy-in that we require. We need to do some upfront effort to do these steps, and now we go to the engagement part. And you could see Prolaborate is being built to foster collaboration. So wherever, in whatever place you are, you'll be able to see a discussion and a share. So it's not just on a dashboard, it's not just on a diagram, it's not just on an element. Every single piece that you define in Prolaborate is shareable, and it could be discussed as well. So if you are sharing this as your primary dashboard to a team, let's say, let me just take an actual example. You are inviting all your application owners and saying, hey, this is the dashboard I want you to look at and maintain these applications as the statuses change. And if they want to share a comment to say, hey, I want this to be grouped by XYZ, they just go add a comment on this particular widget. So a comment is something which is, so it's not like a chat message. It's a comment where, I have a comment and I can tag people. For example, I'm specifically tagging people or users in my in my model and posting a comment. And once I post a comment, they will be notified via emails and in-app notifications, and they will also have notifications like this to indicate that they've been they've been they've been tagged in a comment, or there's a comment that they need to focus on. So it's something that is tied to your outlooks and your normal collaboration platforms, so that people are always informed. So everything in Prolaborate, also I can share it. For example, if I have a complex dashboard like this, I can share a dashboard. I can just go copy a link and share this dashboard. But if you want to be very specific, let's say I want to just copy this roadmap link and share it to someone. Okay, so I'm just going to open a new window and I'm just going to share it. This means they are not going to be shown even a simple dashboard to look at. This is the widget you want them to look at. So just explore, and you see this is an anonymous access. Okay, this can be prevented, but an anonymous access will allow them. There's no project browser, there is no other noise here. This is the only thing, and this is a live chart as well. So you could share even small pieces of information conveniently by just copying a link and emailing it across to people, and they could just look at it. So if you are defining a capability hierarchy, just copy that dashboard and share. But now coming back to the basics of what we started with, the idea was I look at a diagram. Okay, here's a diagram that I am preparing for my users, and they are looking at it and they want to add a comment on an object. So they just look at its properties, they know these are the details, and they want to discuss. They click on discuss, start adding a comment. So everything in EA, the diagram, the objects, the packages, the even the connectors could be having a comment. So I'm adding a comment. I can set a priority for it, and then I could post it, and once I post it, it gets recorded against the particular artifact in the context of this diagram. So each of these comments will give them an option to click and navigate. So it's not a static piece of text. You can click on that particular comment and navigate to this respective object. So if I am getting a notification to say, hey, there's a new discussion on BYOD, I just click on it, I go to the discussion, and then from here I click on it, I go to the actual object for which the discussion was started. So it's pretty much connected to your model and have a smooth collaboration portal built on top of it. So this was the very first idea. We want people to be able to comment on it, give us the feedback, and also invite others to collaborate. So, I can share a link of this diagram and share it to anyone via an email. There's a private share and a public share. Again, this is all controllable. So a private share is where I copy this link, share it to someone. They need to log in or authenticate themselves using an SSO to be able to access it. A public link is something for anyone within your organization. You can give read-only access without logging in, but that's mostly not preferred by a number of large enterprises. But you have this, and then you also have this embed option. Embed option is something which I could just copy this, paste it into a SharePoint page or a Confluence page, and just have an actual, this like an iframe. So I can embed the diagram on a SharePoint page or a Confluence page, and that will be updated automatically. However, this option is not very commonly used these days because there was a security issue. I think it was log4j or something like that, which kind of raised an alarm on this cross-site scripting. And I'm sorry, I'm not that technical, but there was a major change in policies after this Node4j, and people have kind of prevented iframes from happening. For Confluence, there was a question on Confluence as well. I want to quickly show you that there is a Prolaborate Confluence macro, which is endorsed and included in the Atlassian website. So this is a quick video which demonstrates this. And what you see here is within Confluence, you will have a Prolaborate macro, and that Prolaborate macro will allow you to browse through a EA model, for example, diagrams and packages and elements, and you choose a diagram and say publish. So that's pretty much the effort you have to do to publish it. And once you publish it, a live view of the diagram is published in the in Confluence. And this is a diagram that is live from EA. You can actually zoom in, zoom out the diagram, and you'll also have a live list of objects from that diagram published underneath. And this is not a flat list as well. This is something that you could filter and search and also see all the relevant information. Again, the form that you define in Prolaborate is what is seen in this table as well. So it's all the curated view that you have in Prolaborate taken to Confluence. I know this is it's a side topic, but there was a question on that, and I wanted to mention it when I was talking about iframe, because iframe is not really supported by a number of organizations or allowed by a number of organizations these days. So I can share a diagram, and I can even type a name of another user and email it to them. So it's built to foster collaboration. Where any part of your model, you should be able to collaborate, share, and invite people. So that's what it is. And any diagram that you look at, as we've been seeing from the beginning, wherever you see, you will see bubbles if there's a discussion open. So that's an important part of the collaboration. And just while this is the first thing we introduced, but then there was a request from a number of people that, hey, we are conducting reviews, and our current reviews are done this way. We are publishing it as a PDF or a Word, we are sending it out in an email, and we are requesting people to share their feedback in an email, or we share them an Excel spreadsheet where they fill their feedback, comments, and we are going and updating our model and republishing, and the cycle repeats. Could you do something to address this? So this was the problem or the pain point that was shared to us, and we came up with the review workflow idea in Prolaborate. And what is a review in Prolaborate? It's just a structured workflow where you could have a start date and an end date, a couple of items that you want to be reviewed, and you could invite a few people who you want to look at it and give their approval. and it can all be monitored as separate workflows. So at the same time, I have an application review and I've got a business process review. I am an administrator and the moderator for these two reviews, and clicking on application review, for example, I have invited Andy and Dave to review a couple of applications. So I've got these applications, so like COTS applications, which I wanted to be reviewed and possibly even updated by these people. And in a single dashboard, I'm able to see there are two open issues that I need to address. So I am the modeler here, like I play the role of a modeler, and I see this comment. So I see there are two open discussions as part of this review. I click on this, I get to see these two reviews, and then there's a comment as well. So customer management system life cycle needs to be checked. So it's in production, but the sunset date is pretty much past. So now I am the modeler. I could edit it in Prolaborate itself, like I have the edit permission, but technically a change like this will involve EA changes, let's say a diagram change or something more comprehensive, like a connect, like something in EA to be changed. So I go customer management system, I copy, and then let's say I just find customer management system in EA, then I go, okay, so this is in the production status and there's a comment. So I'd say this is, let's say, sunset. Okay, and the next time someone looks at this, so if someone looks at production management system, which should be here, or I'll just search for it. Okay, let me just search for it, or I'll just go back to the comment. So I'll go back to the reviews, application review, and I see that there is an open comment which was on sorry, customer management system. I mean, I think customer management system. And then I say, I look at this and then I reply, so updated. And then the other user who raised this comment, they could look at the status and they would know that it's already in the sunset mode. So I am listening to my users, updating my model, and I'm notifying them that it's been updated as well. And then they could say, I'm looking at this as like Andy. So and I look at my reviews. So application review is something that I'm expected to provide my approval on. So I'm looking at customer management system, and I've already given an approval because I said mark all as reviewed, but I could look at it and say, okay, this is the comment I made, it's been changed, and then I go ahead and say I'm kind of approving it. So it's kind of including active, like a real-time review on top of your EA models and engaging people to interact and collaborate with us. And this has been designed very carefully in such a way the user, so this is a user's view, this is a reviewer's view, they don't get to see all the complex charts and graphs. These are the items that we want you to review, and this is these are the list of applications, and you just go provide a review. So what I did was I said mark everything as reviewed, so it was all checked, but each item will have an option for them to click, look at its details, and if they have edit permission, they can even update it. Like this is again up to you. If you want to give them edit permission so that they could even update a few things, they can. If not, just they could add a comment or say I'm done with this. So you just go ahead and mark it as review. It's that simple, and it's all real time EA model from the central repository that's being shared to them. So that's the review and collaboration part, which is the crux of the whole platform. All the steps that we did previously is to get to a point like this, and that's what the last use case is about, engaging. And we have the the right tools to get out of these siloed approaches where people work in their own buckets, and there's plenty of things to make sure we reach to the right people in the right way and notify them at the right time. So it's all been taken care of, and reviews is something that we just saw. And the last thing, just as a closing note, is like some of the new features introduced in 4.2, which again has been something that was requested over a period of time. So we spoke about standardized colors and heat maps. I think I already addressed that. I would like to talk about reports and charts, but that's also a secondary use case. But I would like to talk about analyzer more. Analyzer is something, all these use cases that we saw is for someone who is not an EA modeler and they do not want to get into the complexities or the nuances of the EA model. They want to look at it, get some insights out of it, and move on. But there are people who could go more than that. So I've got, let's say, a diagram like this, an application view diagram like this. As a modeler, I was able to put together something like this because I know EA, I know how to use it. But there could be users who may also want to do this what if analysis, and that's possible from Prolaborate, and that's through what we call analyzer. So I'm just going to go to my diagrams. I'm going to open a diagram which I just prepared. So if you look at this diagram, this is something that I just did in EA. So if I go back to Enterprise Architect, this is the diagram that I just put together. Just for clarity, maybe I'll remove these. Just have a view around PPM, and let me just go to Prolaborate and click on this. You could see that's the updated diagram for me. So if I want to analyze this using Prolaborate, the analyzer is quite useful. So I'm just switching this to an analyzer view. And what you'll see is the same diagram, like, I've got the PPM and I've got all the objects that are connected to PPM. Each of these objects, these are, there are application components, there are data objects, there are activities, there are capabilities. But for someone who is least bothered about all the notations, all they want to see is nodes and connections, this is quite a handy view. Of course, you can enable EA icons as well, like, just to see what it all actually represents. But the most prominent use cases, I've got objects and nodes connecting them, and I kind of know what they are. So there's application component, I can choose colors and things like that for my convenience. But the essential part here is I click on this object, it shows me everything that is connected to it. So if I want to add a few more objects to my diagram, so this is pretty much like a what if analysis done through Prolaborate. Like, instead of looking at complex diagrams and any of the complex features that one has to go through to do the same in a modeling tool. So I'm just building a view, I'm clicking on Genesis, and I get to see the data objects connected to it. So I just keep adding objects to my view, and then finally I can apply filtering as well. So I can choose what connectors, what data types to be shown, and if I want to understand the impact of something, I just select that object and say show me the impact of changing something like this, or if I want to understand the impact of this. So it's just a really useful way to take the information that you have modeled in EA and let someone who is having this penchant to do this what if analysis or impact analysis play around with it. And there are plenty of ways to navigate. So this is diagram specific traceability, there is context specific traceability, there's project browser. So there's multiple ways to build these views, but in a nutshell, it's about going from one object and trying to find its dependencies and just keep building your view as you see fit. Okay, so that's the analyzer part of it, and that's also something that's new in 4.2. Okay, so that's pretty much what I wanted to show in this training. So these are all except the report configuration. I've covered pretty much everything. So report configuration is something that we are defining a multi-level charts. You can just save that as a report configuration. So if you are having another 3-level hierarchy that you want to apply to, you could start from that predefined report and just modify the type of connectors or the type of objects so that you don't have to do everything from scratch. So that's the report configuration, which is also something very new in 4.2. So that's pretty much what I wanted to show. in this session. I know there is plenty of other things which we can explore, but the idea was you have invested in a software, and there is plenty of things that it has been designed to do. There is and you have an EA model, you have modelers who are working on it. There's all these capabilities that could really elicit and elevate the value from the model, and we want to show you that this is how you approach it. And there's plenty of help and videos and resources, and our team is also willing to provide more guidance if required, if you are kind of exploring in these avenues. So that's pretty much what I wanted to show, and I'm just going to switch to the questions. Nabil and Sajat, are there specific questions, have you got a prioritized list of questions that you want me to start with?
Nizam, I think we have answered most of the questions, and we don't have any one open at the moment. So yeah, we will share the slides as well, and yeah. So there are questions related to discussions and upcoming features. So I think we have answered all those queries. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. I'm just seeing some questions that I can try to give a quick answer, but then I will also try to provide a more detailed response in the Teams as well. So just going, the last question was can a tag value be added in Prolaborate 4 if it's not been added in Sparx model? Yes, you can most certainly do that. For example, I'm going to the modeling languages. This is where all this configuration goes. I go to the tagged values, which we call tagged values as custom properties, custom properties, and I can import it from EA, which is what I said, but I can also add a new property. So if I'm going to define something, let's say status, which is not correct because it's a standard property name, and then I can choose what is the type. So it's an enumeration, and then I specify value as value 1, value 2, value 3, and this becomes a tag value. So this is pretty much EA's tag value definitions. The only flip side is we cannot see the same definition in Sparx EA at the same time. We need to again do an export and import. So as long as you're aware that defining in Prolaborate wouldn't make it available. So you will see the tag value, the applied tag value you will see in EA. Just the definition will not be carried over. If that makes sense. And there's another interesting question: how can you connect documents? So if, for example, you have PPM, and I'm just going to say a linked document. Okay, so I'm just going to add a linked document to it. I'm just going to take a, just to show that I'm just pasting an image into this linked document. So for PPM, I'm adding a linked document. In Prolaborate, how you will see that is, so if I just have to navigate to PPM. There are multiple ways to navigate to PPM, but in this diagram, I would have PPM, and for this, I just have to go to the references. So references is where you find linked documents or files that you attach to it. So in EA you can also have files attached to it. So both of them will be shown in the references page. So there's a linked document. I can just preview. So if I preview it, this is the document that I just added. It was a screenshot I just pasted, but this is the document attached to PPM. I could view it or I could download it. I could just download it and save it for my reference. So linked documents and files both are supported as well. We cannot add a linked document through Prolaborate, but if done in EA, we'll be able to see it here. Okay, so there is another question. Again, I'll just try to answer the questions in the rest of the time, but then I'll try to provide a response for each one of these later on. So there's a query which says, if I'm upgrading from version 3.5 to 4.2, will all the dashboards be updated or upgraded as well? Yes, to most extent, yes. So if you are intending to migrate from 3.x to 4.x, what we do is our team will connect with you, try to do a quick assessment of what you have in 3.x. 90% or more, like 95%, will be migrated as is. There are some features which we decided to park or drop. As I said, we introduced a few features which we thought would be interesting to the users, but then if the usage or the adoption is very minimal, we are just parking it, because we don't. One of the things we've been very particular about is not to overload the tool with like too many features. We want to just have the most sought after features, the ones that are going to be used by most people, rather than having a cluttered, too busy kind of an interface which could do 100 good things. So there will be 95%, it will be a seamless migration, but our team will do a quick assessment of your dashboards, like by just sending you a questionnaire. And if we say it's if we feel it's okay, we will be assisting you with the migration as well, and it will bring most of the dashboard contents across without any issues. Okay, so there are some issues that's been reported as well. So we'll try to explain that in the forums, like in the Teams channel. If not, we'll take each of these comments and suggestions and respond accordingly. But then I'm just trying to find if there are any quick questions that I can answer. So there are a couple of questions around whether I can filter these contents based on status or tags, like this my diagrams view or the visibility based on some status. We haven't had that request in the past. We haven't seen a model that is that well defined, but that makes a ton of sense. We'll try to take that as a recommendation or suggestion and see the feasibility of implementing something like that. But as a workaround, as I said, I'll be able to define a catalog or a table with specific filter applied and just make this as the default dashboard for a user. So this is a very congested interface, but let's say I just make it big enough that this becomes the focus, so I don't have to have all these in one place. So I could just take a big list and show to the user. So it's kind of rendering to them as a catalog, and they can navigate from here as well. So this is a workaround instead of filtering everything entirely based on a tag value, but we'll try to take that feature and discuss. So there are some critical feedback as well. So the suggestion is Prolaborate is very complex compared to Sparx EA. That's very interesting. I'll try to read them and try to respond to them accordingly. It's interesting perspective. I haven't heard that comment before, but we'll try to respond to that as well, if that's what the opinion is. I think most of the other questions I've quickly answered. I'll try to continue this discussion in the teams, like me, Sujat, and Nabil will try to answer most of your queries. I would just like to thank everyone for your valuable time. So it's 3 hours. It's not that easy, but I hope it was useful, and there was some value add in the time that you committed. Thanks once again for joining. Thanks, Nabil.
Thanks, Nizam. So before we close, I have one more poll to launch. So yeah, here we go. So I'll close the poll in a minute. Closing the poll in 10 seconds. Thanks, everyone. So here we are at the end of the session. Thanks, Nizam, and thanks everyone for your time during the session. Hope it was very informative and it gave you, deep insights into the topic. Nizam will also be available in the Teams channel to, have a detailed discussion and to answer your questions. And the link is again, I'll paste it again in the chat for your quick reference, so that you can, if you haven't logged in, you can just log in and check. If you have any issues, please write to our email registrations@eaglobalsummit.com. And thanks once again, everyone. Looking forward to host you in another wonderful session at this summit shortly. Thanks, Nizam.
Thank you. Thanks.